Hey, everybody, welcome to She Shed Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Linda Schwartz, and today I'm here with a super funny lady by the name of Danielle Mercurio. Welcome, Danielle. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, I am stoked to be here too.
Well, I've done a little bit of stalking. I do this a little bit before each one of my guests come on, and I have to say that you are one funny lady. I love your material and I love that you have a spiritual take on your comedy. So, can you share a little bit about yourself and also your journey, how you found that particular niche for yourself? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started on this path, I'd say, personally, it's almost 9 years ago, right? And kind of was in my own space, rock bottom, needed help, found the world of personal growth. I was ready for it. I was hungry for it, all the things, fell into a spiritual path. And from that place, it took a little bit, but I got to a place where I was full-time as a life coach. I was incorporating astrology. I was helping. I kind of found a niche within, which many of us do, helping new coaches get their businesses going, whatnot. And I started doing more speaking events. I was leading meditations, doing yoga. And I noticed that whenever I would perform, so to speak, or go to lead a workshop or speak at an event, I couldn't help but tell jokes. I couldn't help but drop something funny. And I've always been kind of a funny person, but I never really people would always even say, like, growing up, like, oh, you should be a comedian. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I can be funny in the moment, but I don't really know how to craft that beyond. And I just kind of considered myself a funny person, but nothing beyond that. And then when it started happening at events unintentionally, and people would come up to me after and be like, oh my God, that was so inspiring and you're hilarious. I was like, there's something to this, because I really believe the universe has a sense of humor. I really believe that self-help is really transformational, but it's also very heavy, and we need to lighten up the process. We can get really too serious in a lot of ways. We can get too deep into our personal journey and our personal growth. We can get too caught up in the materialism of everything within a spiritual community. We can get too kind of in our heads with it all. And so I feel like making light of the spiritual community and bringing in some humor and bringing in laughter really helps lighten up the healing process, and also make sure that we aren't getting too full of ourselves in the process.
I love that. I love it. And I've been doing a lot of personal development myself. And I was just, talking to a friend today and sharing that I started my personal development journey when I was, I think, 23 years old, and I'm 36 now. So that's like 13 years. And, it's taken me this long to kind of get out of my own way so that I can have some levity in my life and have this and be able to look at my life and my past with a lens of humor. Mm-hmm. And I never thought that I would get this far, but I feel like there is this heaviness in terms of personal development, because there is, a lot of confrontation when we look at our past. So I love what you're doing, and I love everything that you stand for. Like I said, I've been stalking you a little bit online, and I love that you're a coach and that you are doing all of these things to really empower people to really step into their bigger and highest selves. Like, can you share with us a little bit about your journey into that, how you became a coach, and then also your creative process?
Yeah. So, I mean, like long story medium, if you will, I was kind of always the person that didn't really know what she was supposed to do with her life. Like, there was always this feeling, like when I found out I was a Leo, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, right? Like, if I found out I was like a Capricorn, it'd be another story. But I found out I was Leo. I was like, this is awesome. I'm meant to do like really cool things in the world. I'm meant to be in front of people. But I didn't really know what that meant. And when I started to observe my outer world, no one seemed to be doing things that involved being in the spotlight. Everyone was kind of doing things that were in society's time frame, right? Like, do well in school, go to college, get a job, get married, get the house, have the kids, blah, blah, blah. And pick a major. And it was almost like, even if you wanted to pick a major that was maybe more arts-based or performance-based, there was still that connotation, at least for me, that like, that's not safe, that's not stable, you're really not going to get ahead, that's not what you should be doing. And I felt like everything I wanted to do, I felt like the world around me was saying, don't do that. And so it was very conflicting and it was very confusing. And so for much of my teens into my early 20s, I did go to college. I went to Temple here in Philly, and my major was elementary special ed. And it was fine. But I knew deep down, I was like, again, I'm a teacher now, but I knew I wasn't meant to be a teacher in that way. I was just playing it safe. I was hoping that if I did what people told me, I would feel some sense of completion. I'd feel some sense of fitting in or normalcy. But that wasn't happening, right? Like, following the rules, doing what I'm supposed to do just left me with more stress and more confusion. And so after college, I decided not to continue with teaching. And so I was just bartending, waiting tables, and just even more lost. And I was just like, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? Like, I'm seeing all my friends move on and be in this timeline, and I'm not. What's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just make this work? And the more that I struggled with the insecurities around not fitting in, and the more that I, kind of dealt with this feeling of like, I'm not doing what society's telling me to, I started to find ways to escape, because it's a lot of heaviness to take on, to be like, I don't fit in, or I'm not doing the right thing with my life, Totally. It's really sucky. So started escaping through, drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping. It didn't really matter. Like, for me, that's what I say. I'm like, I'm not really any of those things. I was just, if this could give me some sense of escapism, I'm on board. If this will give me some sense of feeling high, feeling present, or present in a way that made me feel good, I'm on board. So that's what I started doing. I just started partying more. I started to just kind of like keep escaping and just kind of blacking out at night and praying to God, like, just get me through the day, black out at night, wake up in the morning, do it all over again. And that was my life for a few years. And I wound up finally getting a job at a law firm as an assistant. And that was actually really good, because I got some stability, but I was still escaping at night. And through a series of events, I wound up being at a wedding and getting too drunk and being taken advantage of, which was not, clearly ideal or wanted. And it's actually interesting. At the time, I didn't even realize. I thought it was my fault. I thought I was the one that allowed it to happen, and didn't realize that the assault was not my fault. But regardless, it put me into a space of realizing, like, I got to do something. I got to figure something out, because I can't keep living my life this way. I can't keep escaping every night. I can't keep just like hoping that some magical solution will just drop from the sky and heal me, or some man will come into my life and marry me and fix everything, right? So that's when I found therapy. I found group coaching. I really took it seriously. And from there, I found meditation. And it just really started to open me up to myself, and realizing, like, it doesn't matter what other people think. Like, you get to be in control of your life. You get to be your own ally. You get to kind of set the terms. And it wasn't an overnight thing that I came to that conclusion, but through the process of taking care of myself, I realized that. And then that's when I was like, oh, I need to help other people realize this too. So that's kind of how it all started to come together.
That's amazing. And I'd love to hear about your creative process and your creative journey. So I've heard, what I'm hearing you say is that you were in a space of perhaps being a little lost, or just trying to figure things out. And then you discovered personal development, which was a clarifying, or a tool that really has allowed you to really come into yourself as a woman, as a creative. And now that you're here, like, doing the stand-up comedy, doing everything that you're doing, like, there's a creative process in that. And I personally believe that creativity isn't like necessarily all art. The act of creating is really like being in tune with yourself, with spirit, and listening to the impulses and following and taking action on those impulses. Can you share a little bit about your own creative process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a lot about being outside, allowing yourself to be outside the box, right? For me, when I first got into, I found coaching, I found a certification program, got certified, and then it was like, oh shit, like, now what, right? Like, I'm like, hey everyone, I'm a life coach. And everyone's like, it was like crickets, It's like, okay, cool, good for you. Like, what is that? you know? And so for me at first, I was struggling because I found myself back in that place I was in before where I was trying to fit in. I was trying to fit in as a life coach. And I realized, like, wait a minute, Danielle, the reason why you even became a life coach is because you realized you're not here to fit in. You're here to stand out and help and inspire. So how can I do that in the coaching community? And that became my first priority was, okay, what is it that I do that's innovative? What is it that I do that's unique as a coach? What is it that I do that would set me apart from other people? And so for me in the beginning, it was a lot of trial and error, me just, creating videos, me finding things that would be kind of fun for my ideal client. Like in the beginning, I used to do in New York this event called Meditation and Margaritas. And it was a way to get people in the door, because if I just said, like, come to my meditation class, again, crickets, like no one cared. But I realized that, my sweet spot was like kind of the gateway people. And there's the people that usually would spend their evenings at happy hour. So I'm like, I'm going to bring them the happy hour, So kind of meeting people where they're at and finding ways that speak in their language. So that's how it kind of first started. And then I've always been into astrology. And I realized that astrology makes for a really beautiful icebreaker when you're coaching with people. And so I started bringing astrology and those concepts into the coaching process. I became certified in Kundalini yoga, but again, like not teaching it, still keeping the tradition, but like, again, meeting people where they're at, finding music, finding different mudras and sets that related to real life current experiences. I think that's the most important part is, where is your ideal client? Where can you meet them and where they're at? And where can you speak in their language and give them something exciting and new and fun that they're like, oh my God, that sounds like really different, but also really cool at the same time. So that's how I was able to, really start to get my start and actually like receive and make income with my business. So yeah.
That's so great. And I love that you've been on this journey and have incorporated comedy into your business. And comedy itself is a business. It's show business, right? And merging those two are like, I think it's brilliant that you're doing that, because, one of the things that I've always heard in terms of like the business of comedy is, number one, to know your audience. And, that is applicable in business as well, like knowing your audience. And two, giving them a unique perspective or a unique selling proposition, which is yourself or your comedy, right? And so and since this is a show about empowering women in comedy, I would love to talk a little bit about finding your niche or niche. I say, if I feel Frenchy, I say niche. But I feel like you have really dialed it in and dialed it down to such a specific market for yourself that it is, number one, like it's empowering women who are spiritual and doing it in a way that is cultivating a genuine and like a super genuine reaction. Like when I was watching your comedy this morning, I was like, oh my God, yes. Like it was so relatable because I for one am a little woo woo too. And I just love that. So talk a little bit about finding your niche in comedy.
Yeah. So it happened pretty organically. As I mentioned, it just started happening within what I thought was motivational speaking, right? So I'd be hired to speak at an event about self-love, and the jokes started coming out. So I realized there was something to that. And I guess it's been 2 years now that I kind of launched this concept, and it's really evolved since I first launched it. The first time I started to look at, I didn't want to be a stand-up comedian per se, because when you go to an open mic and the kind of stuff that I wanted to talk about wouldn't be my ideal audience. So I was like, all right, I need to gather together my community and I need to create an experience. So I look at it more as a comedy experience where it's a mix of storytelling, jokes that I've thought of along the way, but really the show is really just me making fun of myself and how ridiculous I am. And because it's true. Like, I mean, I have freaking Crystal on my lap right now. And like, we did it's and again, it's very much for a niche audience. And it's really about me noting my everyday interactions and also observing the community. Because I think, and to be completely honest with you, where it really started to stem from, I started to get a little angry with the community. I was noticing a lot of spiritual bypassing. I was noticing people getting too dependent on the law of attraction and too, looking for signs. And so like, like, oh my God, I need another angel card reading. And I was like, whoa, like people are starting to miss the point here. Like this is all like the gateway stuff. This is all surface level, and it's fine to like engage in it all, but you've got to be willing to keep going. And I noticed that I was becoming really upset with that when I was seeing that, and I was seeing people not really doing the work, but pretending. And so, and I'm not the type of person to point the finger. I don't really get mad online. That's not my thing. I can't be offensive. I'm too much of a people pleaser, codependency, all the things. So that's when I think for me, the comedy really started to come forth, because I was like, this is my opportunity to make light of things. And I want us to have a good time and laugh at ourselves, and also see like, okay, maybe sometimes we do get a little bit ridiculous, or maybe like, it doesn't always have to be like, about the number that we saw and if that means we're on the right track or not. So that was the initial inspiration, was to actually help me deal with some things that I was seeing. And then it started to turn into like an actual entertaining experience. So it started out, 2 years ago with me just trying things out, seeing if it would stick. My first show sold out. I mean, which is so rare in the comedy community.
Oh my God,
like, you have to work your ass off to get, and don't be wrong, I had to work really hard to gather a community to begin with, but to be able to, sell out, selling, $30 tickets or something like that is like a big deal. When you're in the comedy arena, I was learning, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it in their way, because their way is kind of a little bit of a starving artist. And like, I believe, it is. And I was like, I don't like this. I was like, wait a minute, like you charge like $5 or you don't charge anything at all. Or if you do get stage time, it's like maybe 5 minutes. And I was just like, that's not how we're going to do this.
I love that you are bringing this forward, because, I feel like, and stand-up comedy has its own trajectory, right? Like you come into this world, you have to do things in a certain way. And for instance, I interviewed this woman, Vicky Barbalak, who just got on to America's Got Talent, and she started her comedy journey 22 years ago. So she started when she was about 38 years old, and now she's 60, and now she's just now like making it, right? But she started in a time when we didn't have technology, and we didn't have all of these other things that could help us leverage and do things in a different way. And so there's still that mentality of like, well, you have to pay your dues, you have to go to open mics, you have to do things in a certain way to make it in this industry. And so I love that you just said, you broke that mold for yourself. You said, how do I do this differently and create something that where I can bring my unique gifts and talents to the people who actually want to hear it. Yeah. And I love that you've created that world for yourself. Now, since, this is a show about empowering women in comedy, I'd love to hear like how, in terms of maybe step by step, how you were able to create that.
Yeah. So, again, I outside the box. So I was like, okay, I know I want to put on a show. I know I want to do it in New York City, because that's where the biggest part of my community is, my biggest reach. So I was living in California at the time. So I was like, all right, I'm going to set something up in New York City. I started looking at vegan or vegetarian, like kind of cool restaurants that did open mics or had music or had any type of setup where I could perform. And I found this one restaurant called Caravan of Dreams, called them up, and I said, what's your least popular night? And they were like, Tuesdays. I was like, perfect. I was like, I want to use your restaurant on a Tuesday night. I will bring people in, they will buy food, they will eat, or drink, whatever. I just want your microphone and your amp. And they were like, all right. That's what we did. And they didn't charge me. They just was the guarantee that I would bring people in the door that would dine.
Well, yeah. Wow. So talk a little bit about your marketing process. Like, how did you get in front of those people, and what was your invitation process like?
Yeah. So to get people in the door.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what it came down to, I was like, hey, you know, my spiritual babes and dudes, I've got a new experience for you. You know, I was like, I'm bringing comedy to the spiritual space. And I was like, you know, come, like, I think at the time I called it Gypsy Unplugged. And it was, you know, and it still is a show about, you know, me as a single girl navigating a spiritual world. And, or you can look at it the other way, a spiritual girl navigating a single world, right?
Yeah.
They go hand in hand. And I really just marketed it as like it's time to have like a really fun night out that isn't always, and I was really stressing, you know, how many events have you been to in the evening where it's more conference or lecture or you're doing yoga or meditation, and that's all great, but wouldn't it be amazing to be in a setting that's still very spiritual, still very much in that self-help space, but you're laughing and you're cracking up and you're eating really yummy food, and I was real and I was really transparent, and I encouraged everyone to bring a friend, and I just shared really passionately about it. I don't do Facebook ads. I don't, and I always, like the show that we just did in LA, we had to turn people away at the door
Wow.
because I just believe in this. And so,
Yeah.
and I believe that it's necessary and it's needed.
Oh, I'm just so touched by everything that you're saying, because I feel like, you know, coming in, so I've been doing stand up now too, but I'm kind of new to the realm in that I'm starting all over from scratch. And I just had my showcase last week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And, you know, coming into this, like, and, you know, Kat Tremarco, we met in a spiritual psychology class, and it was through that class and that course was when it really became clear that I needed to do stand-up comedy. And I have a terrible case of stage fright. Like I don't want to, I'm like, I don't want to, I want to do it, but I don't, you know, like there's this, the sense of reluctancy because of this external thing that I had, like really putting myself out there and being vulnerable. So, but I also recognize that as soon as I made that decision, things just started to flow and move forward. And like you said earlier, you have to put in the work, whether it's, you know, manifesting your dreams or moving your art or your creative endeavor forward or moving your life forward. Like it takes a lot of work to really confront those things. And so I love that you just said, you know, you genuinely and deeply believe in this work and in yourself. And that's why people show up. Like I love that, because I believe that too. And I'm also recognizing that this call, you know, whether or not it's and for me, I do hear the call. It's the impulse. I need to do this. And there's this other part of me, this inner child maybe, that is like, oh my God, don't, you know, like this
Right.
is, why are we doing this?
This is crazy.
Yeah. And, you know, like this word keeps on coming forward for me right now, but, and I heard you say it in one of your comedy bits, but the activation, it's like there is a universal activation that happens when you just say yes and you commit to it and you do what's necessary to get yourself and your work and your life out there. And, you know, coming from God, I just feel like everything that you're saying, like, you know, being a person that has done the work and is now wanting to be a contribution and be seen and be heard, that is just so special. And I just want you to know that I'm a big fan now. Like I love everything that you're about. And I want to talk a little bit about this idea of activation. You know, can you share a little bit about what that actually means and how you get it to work for you?
Sure. So like within the comedy world or just in general?
Oh,
Like
within in comedy, in anything. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like there are parallels.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think, you know, we can all get these like really big ideas and we get these intuitive hits. And there's the inner child that comes up. My inner child just wants to order takeout and watch Bravo, right?
There.
It's like, Like I get the big idea, and then like my ego is like, isn't it time to catch up on the Real Housewives? And I'm like, no, gotta do this, you know? And so it's that realization that it's gonna be scary to put it into place, but there's also that realization that you would not have birthed the idea. It wouldn't have come to you if you weren't able to facilitate it. And it may take a couple trials. Like I feel like right now, 2 years later, I'm really in the craft of it. I've got my groove. I would say this last show I did was my least amount of nerves leading up to it. But there were times where I just wanted to call it off, forget it. I'm too nervous. I'm terrified. And especially with comedy, because you're being really vulnerable. And there's an expectation that you need to make people laugh, which also is for me, that was the biggest piece of pressure, as opposed to a motivational talk. It's like, okay, yes, the intention is you're going to inspire. That's great. But at the end of the day, if you don't, you're not so reliant on the feedback from the audience. Whereas in comedy, as you probably understand, there's an exchange that's happening.
Absolutely.
And it's the audience that can help fuel you. But if you become dependent on that, it can mess with your head. So in this idea of activation, it's kind of realizing, okay, I don't have a choice. And if I keep dancing around this, I'm just going to be more upset, more depressed, honestly, and more lacking from the space of my purpose. So it really just comes down to that trust of like, I know this, I'm a natural, I've got my intentions and my beats in order, I'm doing the work, I've been, practicing, rehearsing, and I'm going to come out on stage and I'm going to trust. And that really for me is the activation. As soon as I pick up that microphone, it's like, it's go time. It's, something greater than me is working.
Yes.
Within me and outside of me to create an experience. And that's the most fun. And that's the biggest high that you can only achieve by that willingness to show up.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, they say that success is just showing up. Like 90% of success is just showing up.
Yeah.
And I love that because I feel like, stand-up comedy itself, like this industry and this world, it's like, for me, like you said earlier, it is such a vulnerable space to be in. There is a lot of expectation, and there is, if you're being called to do this work, and I do think that it is a calling for a lot of people, where, you're coming into this space knowing that you have a job to do, and that is to, provide a sense of relief from people's suffering, right? Like I feel like that, like at the heart of it, that is our spiritual work. That to me is why I do this and why I take it so seriously. And and it's hard work. I have been in classes for like 6 weeks. Like it doesn't come naturally to me, and I know that I have to work really hard at it. And so I love the idea of just showing up and activating that knowingness and that trust and that calling, because it is such a beautiful gift that we're providing and sharing with the world.
Definitely. Yeah. And staying open. I think some of my best material comes out on stage. So a lot of times I'll have a set in mind and I'll get up there, and depending on, again, I think that's why it is a blessing in a way to be so much more spiritually aware, because we have an ability to really read our audience and read the energy of the room. And because of that, we can shift and adapt as need be, where some people may not be as aware and open to that process.
Totally.
And I think, more advanced comedians have that gift too, clearly. But again, it's like we've done different work leading up to this than maybe some other people, but we both kind of get to the same place of being able to read the room. And I find that, depending on the room, some of my stories may shift, some of I may go a little bit of a different direction, and sometimes completely new things will just drop. And it's the coolest thing.
Oh, I love that feeling when you're just so open and the intuition just in that moment comes forward. So we're coming up at the top of our time, but before I let you go, we're going to do one woo-woo thing. Woo, woo, woo. And I have a deck of intuitive wisdom cards. They're oracle cards. So I'm going to pull a card for you, and you're going to tell us what that means for you. Okay? All right. So you just tell me when to stop and to pull.
Okay. Sounds like the Dados on the other day.
Girl.
Okay, pull.
Tell me when. Tell me when to pull out.
Yeah, pull out.
Oh, wow. Okay, so your card is intuition.
Amazing. So beautiful. Is that a peacock?
Yes.
Ooh, I love. Oh, it's a woman like as a peacock.
Yes, it's a woman sitting like this with
Hmm.
her beautiful peacock.
I love it. I love it. And it just
Yeah.
says intuition at the
And
bottom.
it says intuition at the bottom.
Beautiful. So for me, I mean, it just means keep following my own heart, my own soul, and trust in what I'm hearing. Because I find for me, whenever I'm stuck, it's one of two things. I'm stuck because I'm listening to what other people are telling me to do and what I think they expect of me. And the other thing that gets me stuck is I get impatient sometimes.
Mm.
And that impatience actually creates a stuckness because I want something to happen that isn't completely come to form yet. So I'm manipulating the process, which then is actually just creating more confusion and more stuckness to begin with. So I find that in honoring my intuition, I can take my time, I can trust, I can flow, I can evolve, and it will be of my own accord. It'll be outside of the box, and it will happen in a really beautiful timing and much faster than my impatient ego would anticipate anyway. It's so funny how we get so impatient, but really it's like, it really is always right around like the next corner. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. And Danielle, like I said, I love everything that you're doing. But one more question before I let you go, and that is, if you were to give a woman like me who's new to stand-up comedy some advice, maybe from the spiritual context, what would your three pieces of wisdom or advice be?
Yes. So my wisdom would be don't get so stuck on doing the stand-up part right. So, in stand-up comedy, there's a lot of different formulas and systems and setups and callbacks and whatnot. I would say the biggest thing is to show up as yourself and show up with the intention, I'm here to entertain and I'm here to inspire. And when you do that, it takes away some of, again, the old archetypes of comedy, and it allows you to really just be in a space where, like we were talking about, there are people that are coming in that are looking for a release, and that's your role as a healer, and you're using the healing sacred art of laughter to do so. And so, release any of the technical stuff, and just really let your true soul shine. And I also think it's really helpful for me. I find that I look to myself more as a storyteller on stage than a stand-up comedian. So just share the funny things that happen to you, and don't be afraid to be a little bit organic as you tell the story, or weave in a little bit of improv to tell your experience. I think that really opens up in a lot of ways too, and really helps people resonate. So I would say that, and just have a good time. I know it's nerve-wracking. I know you're nervous. I know you want it to be like X, Y, and Z, but like seriously, just be like, I'm here to have a freaking great time. I have a microphone in my hand right now, and I can say whatever I want.
Yeah.
So I'm going to.
Cool.
And just leave it at that.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us. If you're ever in San Diego, please know that you are welcome to come to the She Shed anytime and have these kinds of conversations, because I'd love to feature more women just like you and have you back. So with that, thank you. And bye, guys. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time. Bye.